Everything looks delicious, the elderly lady said, gently lowering her eyes as she stood next to her husband. Most of the customers visiting the bakery were familiar faces from the neighborhood, but this elderly couple was new to me. What is this feeling? I wondered, caught in a strangely comforting sensation that I couldn't quite put into words. Listening to their exchange, I inexplicably found their voices soothing. It was a nostalgic sound, like something I'd lost a long time ago, the kindly smiling face of the elderly lady. Where could it be? Where had I seen these two before? Then I remembered, the husband had been looking outside through the shop's partition, and it was then I first noticed another person standing outside. A woman in her 60s, pacing back and forth in front of the shop, glancing our way but quickly averting her gaze and hurrying off whenever our eyes met. But after a while, she returned and looked our way again. "Hey, why don't you come in?" the husband called out to her impatiently, followed by the elderly lady. "Yes, do come in, won't you?" Encouraging. Then, turning her gaze back to me, she smiled. "She's our daughter," and said, "I'll have the croissant." "Please give me a croissant," the woman said, covering her face with her hands as she timidly entered the shop. As I packed the croissant into a bag. "Today is our granddaughter's birthday. She loves croissants." The elderly lady smiled joyfully. "What a coincidence. Today is my birthday too. I've loved croissants since I was a child." The elderly lady laughed, but then, seeing my name tag, "You, this person," she suddenly trembled and started to cry. "My name is Amelia, a 40-year-old single mother. I'm currently working at the bakery while raising my daughter Lily, who just started elementary school. I don't want Lily to feel lonely, but the early mornings at the bakery and not being able to spend much time with her is my biggest worry. Starting with the early morning prep, closing the shop at 7 p.m., and when I get home, Lily always clings to me, but I'm too tired to properly engage with her. I'm making my child feel lonely after all." I reflect, looking at my sleeping child's face. Growing up, my family situation was always different compared to others. I barely remember seeing my dad, Matthew, around the house. Whether I was going to school in the morning, coming back in the afternoon, or even at bedtime, Matthew was hardly ever home. On the rare occasions he did come home, he'd take cash from Mom's wallet and leave without a word, heading out again. I grew up thinking that's just how dads were, believing it was normal. However, when I saw a friend walking happily with her family in town one Sunday, I began to wonder for the first time if my family was a bit odd. My friend had a happy look on her face and said, "We're going to a restaurant with Dad and Mom, just the three of us." So, I asked, "Is today some special occasion?" She shook her head. "It's a weekly thing," and replied. The next day, when I was talking about it at school, everyone seemed to say in unison, "Isn't that normal? Is it different for Amelia's family?" As if they were looking at something strange. Matthew hardly ever came home, but in my memory, Mia, who is my mom, was also rarely at home. Mia worked as an insurance agent, and it wasn't unusual for her to have meetings in the evening since some clients were only available during the day, inevitably making her return home late. By that time, I would already be wrapped up in my futon, asleep, but I'd wake up to the sound of the front door opening and closing and footsteps, and call out, "Mom." To which Mia would only say, "Still awake? Go back to sleep." Without any real conversation, I'd fall back asleep and wake up in the morning to find Mia had already left for work, leaving behind a prepared breakfast on the dining table for me to eat alone. Feeling inferior because my circumstances were so different from my friends, I gradually started to distance myself from them, going straight home after school without speaking to anyone. And in the empty house, I would always immerse myself in playing house alone. Seeing this, my maternal grandmother Chloe said, "Why don't you come over to our place to play?" From then on, my place to be was a bit away from home at my grandparents' house. When I was playing house alone, "Let me join in." Chloe would suddenly join in with a voice like a little girl's, saying, "Hello, Amelia." When I got tired of playing house, my grandfather Kevin, who would have just returned from gardening, would join us and the three of us would play cards, or solve puzzles from a quiz book Kevin picked up on his walk from the bookstore. Tired from playing? I bought croissants, let's wash our hands and eat them together. Eating croissants that Chloe bought from a nearby bakery became a habit, with my grandparents sharing one between them and me biting into my own, saying, "This is delicious." Chloe would reply, "It's delicious, isn't it?" The taste of the croissants was wonderful, but more than that, I can now say with certainty that what made me happiest was spending time with my grandparents. Sometimes, when Mia, my mom, finished work early and came home, she would, on those rare occasions, hand me a capsule toy from the nearby game center, saying, "Here, a souvenir. I don't need this." Not knowing how to deal with my mom. "Thank you," I couldn't straightforwardly say. Still, Mia kept buying capsule toys and handing them to me without getting discouraged. I couldn't understand why she kept doing that as a child, but now I think that might have been her clumsy way of showing love. Matthew and Mia eventually started to argue all the time, even when I was asleep in my bedroom. Suddenly, I would wake up to their yelling at each other. "You're always like this. You go to work but hardly ever bring any salary home. Shut up. It's my money. I'll spend it however I want." It felt like they repeated this kind of exchange every night. Eventually, they seemed to give up on each other, the energy in their quarrels faded, and they stopped talking altogether. Then one day, Mia left the house without saying anything to me and never came back. After Mom left, leaving a huge void in my heart. She abandoned you. She chose her job over her own child. She's not fit to be a mom, my paternal grandmother Zoe said. Hearing Mia badmouthed every day as I was overwhelmed by an indescribable despair, I wished I could run away to my maternal grandparents' house to fill the void in my heart. In front of the house, there was a for sale sign, and at that time, not understanding what it meant, I trespassed into the house looking for my grandparents, but there was no sign of anyone. They must have gone out. I believed they would return soon and waited for hours, but my grandparents never came back. As the day turned to evening, filled with anxiety and fear, I cried out loudly, "Grandma! Grandpa!" And perhaps a neighbor called the police because a patrol officer came and the officer joked with me, but I stubbornly refused to move. "You shouldn't enter places like this without permission. Don't play around here and come out. If you don't go home soon, you might even see a ghost." Really, what a troublesome child. Complaining as if bothered, Zoe's voice pulling me by the hand to take me home still sticks in my memory even years later. Matthew was often away from home, and even more so, began to leave for days at a time, increasing his outings. With the nuisance Mia gone, maybe Matthew felt freer to go out. When I became a middle schooler, Matthew, either lacking confidence in raising a child alone or never considering me in the first place, hesitantly placed me in a foster care without any hesitation. The child welfare officer repeatedly asked Matthew, "Are you sure about this?" To which Matthew grimaced as if annoyed. Yeah, and gestured dismissively, leaving the officer in disbelief. I had always been alone, and did not seek Dad's love anymore, so being placed in foster care didn't make me feel sad or hard. In the facility, I could take care of myself without any trouble. In fact, there were many younger children, and to help reduce the burden on the busy staff, I cared for them as if they were my own siblings. Having Amelia here is a big help. Thank you, as always. I was thanked by the facility staff, but for me, having people to talk to and distract from loneliness might have been enough. Interacting with children who had various circumstances made me realize I wasn't special, and seeing the children rely on me made me want to try hard for someone else's sake. One day, when croissants were served as a snack, the sight of them suddenly reminded me of the warm and gentle days spent with my grandparents, and I couldn't help but burst into tears. Why are you crying, big sis? I wonder why. Maybe it's because I remembered the precious times from the past. This is delicious. I've never eaten such a tasty bread before. Seeing the children stuff their mouths full of croissant and show their bright smiles, I started to dream of working in a bakery someday. After graduating middle school, I chose a high school with a home economics course. I was confident in cooking, but the school offered lessons from the basics of baking, making it an ideal environment for someone aspiring to be a baker. Upon graduating high school and leaving the facility, I immediately landed a job at the bakery I had always dreamed of, and at the same time found an apartment that was a bit small but just right for living alone. The bakery was a small shop run by a couple who were both bright and kind, treating me like their real child. The concept of this story is, we want to deliver delicious food to families. We want to see happy faces of families. Treat every customer as if they're precious family. When I started working, the owner instructed me with those words. Hearing the word family, I didn't quite understand what it meant at first, but I thought of the faces of the children at the facility. No matter how early the mornings were, remembering their happy faces made all the hardships vanish in an instant, and I mysteriously didn't feel the pain during preparation work. When a customer with children said, "The bread here is delicious," my face would unconsciously smile. "You have a nice smile." And the owner would praise me. One day, as I admired a mother and child buying croissants to take home, the owner gently asked, "Amelia, I've always wondered, do croissants hold a special meaning for you?" The taste reminds me of memories eating with my grandparents. I spent a lot of time with them as a child. I shared with the owner my journey from early childhood to entering the facility. Then the owner began with a preface. "If it were possible, would you want to meet your grandparents again if you could? What about Mom? Would you want to live with them?" Caught off guard by such an unexpected question, I was at a loss for words. Honestly, there were many times I wished I could meet them. Yet, I felt like I shouldn't want to meet them. Both my grandparents and Mom had abandoned me, and I kept telling myself that there was no way we could meet again. I don't think so. I've never thought about it even once. I answered, avoiding the owner's gaze as if trying not to let him read my mind. "I see. That's fine then." The owner showed an ambiguous reaction. Whether he believed me or not was unclear. When about 10 years had passed since I started working at the bakery, there was a significant change in my personal life. I fell in love with a male regular who always came to buy and married him 6 months into our relationship. We struggled to have children for a few years, but at the age of 34, I was finally blessed with a daughter, Lily. However, right after the child was born, my husband became cold towards me, and constant quarrels led to divorce. The custody battle was contentious, but thanks to a skilled lawyer introduced by the owner, I managed not to lose Lily. Yet, seeing Lily's lonely expression sometimes made me reflect. Have I only made my daughter feel the same way I did? As I watched her sleeping face. One day, while eating dinner with my daughter, Lily, who had just started elementary school, was curiously looking at a small rubber doll toy. "What's that? Did we have this?" I was puzzled by the unfamiliar toy, but then noticed a capsule toy container on the floor. "Did you buy this?" I asked. "A strange lady gave it to me earlier." "A lady? Where did you meet her? What did she look like?" "She was standing in front of our house when I came back from school. Much older than you, Mom. She seemed to know you. She gave it to me." I wondered, who could it be? Thinking it might be someone from the facility as I tried to recall any acquaintances, but I cautioned my daughter. "Don't follow strangers even if they talk to you." The next day, as I was standing in the shop as usual, an elderly couple I hadn't seen around here came in. Most customers of the bakery are local acquaintances, but sometimes people come from afar having heard of the shop's reputation. I thought this elderly couple was just such customers, but then... What's this feeling? I was caught by a strangely familiar, comforting sensation that words couldn't quite describe. "All these look delicious," the elderly woman said happily, turning to her husband standing beside her. Yet for some reason, her voice also made me feel inexplicably comfortable. It was a voice from a distant past, a familiar yet nostalgic tone, the elderly woman's kindly smiling face. Where have I seen these two before? I noticed the husband kept glancing outside the shop, and I thought he wanted to leave quickly, but the woman didn't seem to rush him. Then I noticed for the first time that there was someone else standing outside the shop. A woman in her 60s was pacing back and forth in front of the shop, glancing over here but quickly looking away whenever our eyes met, then hurrying off. But after a while, she came back and looked over when the impatient husband called out to the woman. "Hey! Why don't you come in too? Come on in, don't be shy." Followed by the elderly woman. The elderly woman turned her gaze back to me. "She's our daughter," and smiled. "Everything looks delicious, but we'll have the croissants." "Please, croissants." Though I thought she wouldn't be shy at her age, the elderly couple's daughter covered her face with her hands, timidly entering the shop. As I was bagging the croissants, the elderly woman smiled happily. "Today is our grandchild's birthday. She has always loved croissants. Thinking of meeting her again makes me so happy." She expressed her joy. "Really? What a coincidence. Today is my birthday too. I've loved croissants since I was a child." The elderly woman laughed. "Is that so?" But after seeing my nameplate, "You, this person," she suddenly trembled. Confused, I asked, "Are you okay?" Instead of answering, the elderly woman murmured, "I'm glad to see you're well. To think this day would come. I'm glad I lived to see it." Amelia, right? It's me, do you recognize? Don't you remember?" Saying that, the elderly woman suddenly began to cry. Every time I encountered the elderly woman's kind face and her gentle voice, I felt an unbearable tightness in my chest. Now gone to a distant place, a precious presence that warmly enveloped me. Could it be Grandma? Grandma Chloe? "Amelia, you remembered me," said my grandmother Chloe as she wrapped my hand in her warm ones. That meant the woman who had been looking down behind the partition. "Mom, right?" "Yes, your mom," said the woman, finally speaking up. Because over 30 years had passed since our last goodbye, I hadn't immediately recognized the three when they entered the shop. But the three in front of me were unmistakably my grandparents and Mom. Trembling, I handed the goods to Chloe. "I still have work to do, so later. We'll be resting at the park over there. No matter how late, it's okay. I want to talk to you," Chloe said, looking into my eyes with a firm tone. The owner, who had watched everything from the back of the shop, came over to me. I told your mom and them where you live. Was that okay? I had a feeling you actually wanted to meet your mom and grandparents. No, it's fine. Thank you. Looks like it's slow today. Let's close up early. So, changing into my private clothes and without even taking my bag, I dashed out the back door of the shop. Bringing the 3 back to my apartment, it felt cramped for a studio, but it might have been just the right size to fill the hole in my heart that had separated me from my family for so many years. Opening the door, Lily, who had returned from school, was doing her homework. Ah, the lady who gave me the toy yesterday. She pointed at Mia. How did you know I was living in this town? Mia repeatedly apologized to me. Sorry. Explaining how she ended up here after the divorce. My dad, Matthew, worked in a small-town factory but never brought his earnings home, spending it all on drink the same day he received it. What about Amelia? Raising a child will cost money. Mia, needing to raise young me, decided to work in her husband's place. Yet, Matthew's wastefulness didn't improve, and he began to stay away from home more often. Angered, Mia proposed divorce to Matthew. However, during the divorce mediation, Matthew's mom, Zoe, harshly said, "If you really want a divorce, leave Amelia behind." Mia didn't want to give up her child, whom she had born and raised, but believed Zoe when she was told, "That child hates you." No way. I was infuriated hearing this, but Mia repeated, that's right, nodding. But back then, I genuinely believed you hated me. You never seemed happy, even when I bought you toys. Mia, awkward in expressing affection, seemed to have misread my feelings even until the divorce. If I think about it now, I should never have let you go. Afterwards, Mia, as if cutting off memories with her daughter, threw herself into work, but one day, after 30 years, she accidentally met Matthew in town. To Mia, he was like a stranger, but she was still concerned about her only daughter and confronted Matthew about me, who nonchalantly admitted to leaving me in a facility. I had no idea you were put in a facility. I'm so sorry. From then on, Mia, working in a job with flexible hours and collaborating with my grandparents, traced my steps from the facility to the bakery. I've been looking for you for so long. And finally found out you were working at that bakery. You were out for delivery, so I asked the shopkeeper for your apartment. Grandma Chloe's warm and gentle hands enveloped mine. Why did you all leave without saying anything to me? Instead of Chloe, Mia continued. I forced myself to ask them. After Matthew and I divorced, I stayed with my parents for a while. Your house was so close, and every time I saw you, I wanted to hug you immediately. But I thought you hated me, and if we couldn't meet anyway, staying in the same town would just make it harder for me. So, I decided to leave that town with my parents. It was hard for me too. Even after I couldn't see Amelia anymore, I was always thinking about you. What you might be doing now. Are you eating well? Have you caught a cold? That's all I could think about. As Chloe said this, she tightly closed her eyes and looked up at the ceiling, but the tears rolling down from the corners of her eyes didn't stop. Thank you, Grandma. I didn't know you were looking for me. I had always thought I was abandoned by Mom and my grandparents. But learning they had taken the time to find me, I felt like a dam holding back years of emotion had suddenly burst, and I couldn't stop crying. Let's live together again, okay? Shall we? Mia caressed my shoulder and said, but I couldn't simply say yes. Mia hadn't abandoned me by choice. It was a series of events that led to an unfortunate decision. Even though I understood that intellectually, my feelings couldn't readily accept her suggestion to live together again. Dispelling the doubts I had held about Mom in just one day was too short a time. Give me some time to think. Of course. We're staying at a hotel for now, so please contact us whenever you feel like it. Saying that, Mia left a note with her contact information and left with my grandparents. Lily, not fully aware of the situation, asked anxiously, "Are you okay, Mom?" Trying not to worry her, I forced a change in my mood. "Are you hungry? What do you want for dinner?" "I want quiche." "I love the quiche you make, Mom." Lily smiled widely and hugged my waist. I would never let go of this child. And hugged my waist. As I poured the beaten eggs into the frying pan, I remembered a morning from my elementary school days. The morning after Mia left, I woke up to find a quiche she had prepared in advance on the dining table with a note in Mia's handwriting. "Reheat and eat." As I thought about it, the eggs got too cooked. "Sorry, Lily. The eggs got a bit firm. Forgive me?" "It can't be helped, Mom." Lily sighed but smiled. Am I like Mia was back then? The thought that I might be making Lily feel lonely troubled me. After dinner, as I was doing the dishes, Lily rummaged through her school bag and approached me on tiptoe and called out, "Mom, look this way." Turning off the faucet and looking back, Lily had drawn a full-page portrait of me on drawing paper. "Good luck at work." Next to it was a message. "Happy birthday, Mom." "I love you, Mom." Thank you. Overwhelmed by my daughter's casual kindness, I felt a warm surge of emotion. "Mom, are you crying? Why? Was something bad?" I wiped my tears and said, "Of course, it's because I'm happy." Lily looked puzzled. "Do people cry when they're happy too?" "Yes, that happens. My greatest joy is seeing you grow up healthy and happy." I had been so caught up in work from morning till night that I hadn't been able to pay enough attention to home and Lily. I thought maybe Lily hated me, but she told me she loved me. "Thank you, Lily. I'm so grateful you were born my child." The next day was Saturday, and the shop was very busy, but the owner, knowing the situation, offered me a break. "Now that we have a young part-timer, you can take some time off." So, I decided to take Lily out to town. As we entered the restaurant, holding Lily's hand, Mia and my grandparents were already waiting inside. "Thank you for coming today. I was a bit worried you might not." Kevin, who is usually quiet, couldn't hide his relief. Lily, a bit tense seeing the three in front of her. "Hello," greeted them. "Well done. You're Lily, right? How old are you?" "I'm 6 years old." "So, 6 years old. That was about how old Amelia was when she started living apart from us." Chloe showed a complex expression, a mix of the loneliness from separation and the joy of reunion. Lily, initially stiff in front of her great-grandparents, relaxed by the time the meal was served, engaging in conversation on her own. Looking back, I don't remember ever being taken to a restaurant by my parents as a child. I never want Lily to feel that kind of loneliness. "It might be presumptuous of me to ask this," Mia started, exchanging glances and nods with my grandparents. "If you are okay with it, would you like to live with us? Not in your current apartment, but in a new house we could buy and live happily together. What do you think?" "If Lily is okay with it," I found myself saying before I could think it through. Patting Lily's head. "What do you think? Would you like to live with these grandparents?" "Yeah, that would be nice." Mia covered her face with a handkerchief, her shoulders shaking. On the other hand, my dad, Matthew, even though retired now, still spends too much time and money on leisure, estranged even from his own parents, I heard through the grapevine. Rumor has it there was a woman taking care of him, but she quickly grew tired of him and left, and now he's living modestly in a small apartment, cutting into his retirement fund. To us, a family that's completely cut ties, Matthew's later years are of no concern anymore. Truthfully, I'm not sure how much I can forgive and trust the mom who abandoned me, nor am I sure if we can function well as a family in the future, carrying with me a sense of insecurity. Filling a heart that has once widened isn't easy. But maybe it's okay to take it slow? If we can gradually mend our relationship. And if a day comes when I can sincerely feel grateful to be with my family. Not to return to the past, but to create new moments together. Now, surrounded by a warm family, I spend my days happily and joyfully.
"Help me." Panting, our daughter Mary said just that before the call ended. My husband Jim, who was listening next to me, realized this was no small matter, and we immediately took a taxi to Mary's house. In the taxi, anxiety grew by the minute. What on earth could have happened? What did she mean by "help me"? What if she was injured, sick, or in a life-threatening condition? We didn't even know if our grandson Joe was safe. It was also possible that the house was on fire. "Kate, you're as pale as a ghost. Mary will be okay," Jim said, trying to comfort me by holding my hand. All we could do now was to go to her house and find out the truth. I resolved to do just that and waited for our arrival. After about 20 minutes, we arrived in front of a large house. It really is a huge mansion every time I see it. It was built by Ben's father and his parents, with many rooms and an incredible large garden. I remember from our several visits that there were many expensive-looking ornaments. We hurriedly got out of the taxi and were about to press the doorbell when, from afar, the front door opened. "Grandma, run away with Mom!" It was Joe running out towards us. Then Mary came out as well. Both were slightly sweating. "I'm okay, so run away, quickly," he said, handing me the game console we had just gifted him, and then the front door closed. My name is Kate, and I'm 70 years old. Jim, who is 2 years older, and I have run an electronics store in the shopping district as a couple. It's not that we're thriving, but we get along well with our regulars and the people in the shopping district. Just before turning 35, we were blessed with a daughter we named Mary. We poured all our love into Mary, and she grew up to be a kind-hearted person. As an adult, Mary chose not to take over our shop, but instead got a job at a company. Though we hoped she would take over, we wanted her to do what she loves, so we didn't stop her. Even after getting a job, Mary didn't live alone. The three of us lived peacefully together at home. Years later, after meeting Ben, who was 3 years older at her job, Mary married him after 2 years of dating. A few months into Mary and Ben's relationship, Ben had come to our house. Since then, I had a great impression of him and thought Mary would marry this man. It was sad to think of Mary getting married, but I felt I could entrust her to Ben. Jim would say things like, "Mary getting married." But in the end, he seemed to trust Ben too. "Please take good care of Mary," he finally said. After marrying, Mary decided to live with Ben's mother, Susan, in Ben's family home. Ben's father had passed away due to illness when Ben was in high school. The illness was discovered when Ben was in middle school, and he battled it for 2 years. Despite having been a stay-at-home mom, Susan returned her job from before she was married upon learning of her husband's illness. She then single-handedly raised Ben until he graduated from college. Moved by Ben's earnest desire to repay his mother for all her sacrifices, we wanted to honor his feelings. We went out for a meal with Susan once Mary's marriage was settled. It was a dinner for 5. Myself, Jim, Mary, Susan, and Ben. Jim and Susan didn't really hit it off, which was amusing in its own right. I thought Susan was a bit strong-willed, but we quickly became close and got along well. The two of us, both mothers, have gone to cafes together many times. Me, having only raised a girl, and Susan, who had only raised a boy, found much to talk about and enjoyed our conversations. It might seem overprotective, but I was a bit anxious about entrusting our only daughter to her, husband's family home. It's not that we didn't trust Ben and Susan. They were both people I felt I could trust. It's just that we hadn't fully let go as parents. That's how much we doted on Mary. However, Mary would call us about once every 2 months, and even send letters once a month, which eventually eased our worries. Ben had given Mary a grand wedding, and I was delighted to see her in her bridal gown. And we were blessed with our grandson Joe, who started elementary school this year. I still vividly remember how thrilled I was when Mary told us she was pregnant. Having a grandchild had always been a dream of mine. Since then, Mary and Joe have been coming to stay with us every few months, and we've had the chance to see them. We might dote on Joe just as much as we did Mary, giving him gifts and pocket money, taking him to amusement parks, and savoring the happiness of outings with my daughter and grandson. Occasionally, Mary would call to complain. "Ben's never home on his days off, and he's always late coming home from work." But they seem to be managing well. However, since Joe was born, we've hardly seen Ben or Susan. I can't even remember the last time we met. We used to be invited out for meals by Susan once or twice a year. I should perhaps invite them, but I've realized embarrassingly at this age that I've never once invited them myself. With Joe's birthday approaching in 2 weeks, I sent a letter to decide on a present for Joe and to schedule when Mary and Joe could come to stay. But then, unusually, no reply came even after the days when I should have received one had passed. Moreover, my calls went unanswered and there were no callbacks. Come to think of it, while letters occasionally came back, I realized it had been about half a year since our last phone call. Once again, I wrote a letter expressing my desire to send Joe a gift, and this time, a reply came directly from Joe himself. "Grandma, thanks for the letter. I want a game console." It was written in his newly learned clumsy handwriting. My warmth was short-lived, as there was still no letter or call from Mary. "Come to think of it, a regular mentioned seeing Ben out drinking with another woman. Could that be related?" Jim mentioned this one evening as we were quietly enjoying some coffee together. "Jim, when was this? I don't know anything about it," I asked, prompting Jim to recount the incident. "It happened 2 weeks ago, during a time I was busy with household chores and not at the shop. A regular who runs a candy shop in the same shopping district and visits our shop once a week came by. He usually enjoys strolling through the shopping district with his wife before the busy period, when children come in after school. During one of his visits, 'By the way, did Mary cut her hair short?' he suddenly asked Jim. 'No, Mary is proud of her beautiful long black hair,' Jim replied. Mary has always loved her long black hair since she was little, never cutting it above her collarbone or dyeing it. Many people in the shopping district have watched Mary grow up, and several have even attended her wedding. And so they also recognize Ben." The regular then continued. "Then who was the woman with short brown hair walking with Ben yesterday?" According to the regular's account, Ben was seen late last night walking into a bar with a woman, assumed by the regular to be Mary. But he was surprised because the woman looked nothing like the Mary he remembered, prompting him to visit our shop today. Jim hadn't thought much of it at the time, assuming Ben might have work-related reasons to be out with a woman, and he didn't feel it was necessary to tell me, eventually forgetting about it altogether. However, given the odd timing with Mary's silence, it's hard not to speculate. But it's hard to believe that Ben, with Susan, Mary, and Joe around, would do such a thing. I found it increasingly difficult to concentrate on work at the electronics store. A few days later, although the overnight stay didn't happen, I sent the game console Joe asked for, and Mary promptly replied. "Sorry for the late reply. I've been busy lately. Thank you for Joe's gift. He was really happy." The response was no different from her usual letters, and Jim reassured. "See, it's nothing serious. No need to worry." But I felt differently. Could Mary, now a housewife after marrying Ben, really be too busy to reply to a letter? While Joe being in elementary school might bring its challenges, with Susan around to help, it still seemed odd to me. Though I was relieved to get a reply, my worries about Mary remained. Several nights later, the sound of a long unheard ringtone from my cell phone woke both me and Jim. It set to music, so I knew immediately it was from Mary. A call after about 6 months, but she had never called this late at night before. Worried something had happened, I quickly got out of bed to answer. "Help me." Panting, Mary said just that before the call ended. Jim, having heard beside me, realized this was serious, and we immediately took a taxi to Mary's house. What on earth could have happened? What did she mean by help me? What if she was injured, sick, or in a life-threatening situation? We didn't even know if Joe was safe. What about Susan and Ben? It was also possible that their house was on fire. "Kate, you're as pale as a ghost. Mary will be okay," Jim reassured me, holding my hand. All we could do was to go to their house and find out the truth. I steeled my resolve and waited for our arrival. After about 20 minutes, we arrived in front of a large house. It's always impressive, a real mansion. Built by Ben's father and his parents, it had many rooms and a large garden. I remember from our visits that they paid attention to the interior with expensive-looking ornaments lined up. We hurriedly got out of the taxi and were about to press the intercom at the front gate when from afar, the front door opened. "Grandma ran away with Mom!" It was Joe running out towards us. Then Mary came out too. Both were slightly sweating. "I'm okay, so run away quickly," he said, handing me the game console we had just gifted him. Then the front door closed. I thought we couldn't leave Joe behind, but without understanding the situation, I didn't know what could happen if I tried to enter the house now. I decided it was best to take Mary and leave, grabbing her hand, stopping Jim as he was about to pay and get off the taxi. "Please take us back home?" I asked the driver. Another 20 minutes and we were back home. No one spoke in the taxi. Once home, we confirmed our house was safe, and that night, for the first time in a while, the three of us slept in the same bed. The next morning, the ringtone on my cell phone echoed in the living room. Ben displayed on the screen. After looking at Jim, I answered the call. "How dare you take Mary away like that?" For the first time, Ben spoke to me, his mother-in-law, with a tone of authority. Hearing his voice, Mary looked frightened. "I'll be heading to your house now," I said somewhat formally, and then hung up. "Let's go," I said to the lawyer who was nearby. We had contacted a lawyer after returning last night and had them come to our house early this morning. Now the four of us took a taxi to Ben's house. Upon stopping the taxi at the same spot as yesterday, we saw Ben standing at the entrance. "Mary was being treated like a slave by you folks, and I have something to say about that," Jim calmly stated before Ben could speak. "On what basis do you say such a thing?" Ben retorted, but "Let's talk inside," Jim continued calmly, leading us into the house. "Mom, Grandma, Grandpa!" Joe ran down the stairs and hugged Mary. Knowing Joe was safe relieved me. Susan, who seemed to have been preparing breakfast in the kitchen, was startled upon seeing us. "What are you doing here?" Ignoring Susan's words, "We're coming in," was all I said before entering. Ben led us to the living room where everyone gathered, including Susan. The lawyer approached Ben and Susan, handing them his business card. Seeing the word lawyer on the card, their expressions stiffened momentarily. Then, "Let's begin," the lawyer said, placing Joe's game console on the table. It was about the night we brought Mary back. Why did Joe hand me his game console? Curious, I tried to turn it on but had no idea how to operate it. Mary turned on the game console for me. The screen lit up with several videos. A familiar face appeared. Could this be? I played the top video. It showed Susan and Ben speaking harshly to Mary. "You haven't cleaned this area properly. There's dust everywhere. Remember, Ben, Joe, and I live here too. Make it cleaner." I had no idea such things were happening behind my back. I played several videos in order. The second video showed Susan and Ben talking to Joe. "Joe, you promised not to get close to your mom." Susan's tone was still kind, but she insisted, despite Joe's protests. Ben also sided with Susan. "Listen to Grandma carefully." It was shocking to hear them say such harsh things, not just to Mary, but to Joe as well. The video was mostly audio, but the sound was clear. The third video showed Ben from a distance. "I love you," he said on the phone, clearly not to Mary. This suggested Ben was having an affair with another woman. Ben's gentle voice and smile directed at someone other than Mary infuriated me. There were more videos of Ben interacting with his mistress. The fourth video showed Susan and Ben plotting. "We must remarry that heiress at all costs." "Yeah, if we make Mary initiate the divorce, we won't have to pay her compensation." They intended to continue mistreating Mary until she asked for divorce to avoid paying compensation. They were planning a remarriage with the mistress as a mother-son team. How had I not noticed anything? The 5th video showed Susan talking to Mary. Joe's birthday is coming up. As his mother, you need to properly prepare. You don't have time to contact or even stay over at your parents' house. This explained why Mary had been unable to contact us recently. There were over 10 videos. With each video we watched, my anger towards Susan and Ben grew, as did my disdain for my own obliviousness for not noticing anything sooner. All these videos were secretly filmed by Joe, aiming to help Mary without anyone finding out. Joe must have wanted to help Mary, for such a young boy in the 1st grade, to go to these lengths. After watching all the videos, Mary finally opened up and shared everything she had endured. Initially, Ben had been kind, but he gradually became harsher, and the real harassment began, even before Joe was born, worsening over the past year, cutting down the time she could spend with Joe. Despite the hardships, she felt she couldn't ask us for help because she married Ben. She explained through tears. The escalation over the last year was likely due to Ben's affair starting around that time. Susan and Ben reducing their interactions with us was probably because they felt no need to pretend to get along anymore. The incident happened last night. Mary was not allowed to sleep until Ben returned, who came home very late and drunk. More intoxicated than usual, Ben lashed out at Mary, who, reaching her breaking point, burst into tears and fled from him. Ben's loud voice echoed throughout the mansion, waking Joe, who was supposed to be asleep. Mary, trying to avoid being found by Ben, simply made a phone call to me saying, "Help me." Upon waking, Joe initially didn't understand what was happening, but soon, hearing Ben's loud voice, grasped the situation. In that moment, he grabbed his game console and immediately ran around the house to find where Mary was hiding. "Mom, it's okay. Let's run away from here." Joe, with tears in his eyes, urged Mary. Convinced by Joe, Mary nodded, and they both ran to the entrance. That's when we arrived, and Joe handed me the game console and Mary. Joe seemed to have decided to stay, noticing Ben was approaching. "Dad, stop!" Ben, despite being drunk, was halted by Joe at the entrance and did not harm his son. Perhaps Joe knew, somehow, that his dad wouldn't hurt him. I never imagined Joe would be the one protecting Mary. This is also our responsibility for leaving Mary in Ben's care. "Mary, I'm so sorry for not noticing. You've been suffering so much, enduring all this time." Mary cried like a child. I hugged her tightly, vowing to protect Mary and Joe no matter what. I immediately contacted a lawyer to come over early in the morning. We showed them all the videos, asking to secure compensation, gain custody of Joe, and facilitate a divorce. When the lawyer finished speaking, Susan clung to Mary. "No, Joe will be raised by us. He's our child. Say something." She looked at Ben, who stood silent, perhaps hindered by his pride. "Joe is my precious child, whom I gave birth to. I will raise him." For the first time, Mary spoke firmly to Susan, who was taken aback and stepped down. Ben looked frustrated, but accepted everything without saying a word. This time, Joe could finally come home with us. We left the divorce proceedings, the claim for compensation, all necessary actions in the hands of the lawyer. When Ben married, he had switched jobs due to issues at his previous company, facilitated by Jim's recommendation. With the divorce, Ben also lost his job. The heiress he planned to remarry broke things off after seeing him jobless, and burdened with a hefty compensation debt. Susan and Ben ended up selling the mansion and now live modestly in a dilapidated apartment. I sympathized with their struggles. Susan unexpectedly became a single mother, and commendably raised Ben until college graduation. Ben's desire to show filial piety mentioned back then, I believe, was sincere. However, using our precious daughter to achieve their happiness was inexcusable. If they truly regret everything and wish to start over, I hope they find happiness away from us. We've deleted Susan and Ben's contact info, so there will be no further meetings or communication. As for us, Jim, Mary, Joe, and I now live together. Our home isn't very large, but it's sufficient for the 4 of us. Mary has not started a new job, but helps out at the electronics store, with Joe occasionally lending a hand too. Thanks to Mary's customer service and Joe's knowledge of current trends, our store is thriving more than ever. Joe had to change schools, but he quickly made friends at his new school and seems to be doing well, playing happily with the neighborhood children every day. He really likes the game console we gave him for his birthday, and I've promised to buy him a new game soon. Mary has also managed to get along well with the locals, with the elderly customers appreciating her friendly service and enjoyable conversations. Moreover, she's made friends among the mothers of Joe's schoolmates, expanding her social circle. Mom, I really love you. I love you too, Joe. Seeing Mary and Joe so happy up close brings me immense joy. Being able to watch them grow every day is a blessing like no other. Now we can take them out more often than before, cherishing our time together.
Daddy went with Grandma to Italy for a trip, just the two of them. My son, only 6 years old, told me with tears in his eyes, left alone in the room. Really? Is that true? They said only two could go, so I had to stay here alone, he explained. I rushed to my son and hugged him tightly. As a working mother, I had asked my husband to take care of our son during a 3-day business trip that fell over the weekend. But when I returned from the trip, I was greeted by a dark, empty house with my son left all alone. My husband and Sophia, my mother-in-law, in Italy, I had heard nothing about this. Leaving a 6-year-old alone at home to go on a trip is unbelievable, even as a human being. While suppressing my rising anger, I continued to comfort my son. It must have been tough, so lonely. If my son wasn't here, I'd scream out loud in frustration. Initially, my husband was cooperative in our marriage, but as our son grew, he gradually distanced himself from the family. He was always with Sophia, even on weekdays and weekends, practically living at his parents' house. Despite numerous attempts at discussion, he would excuse himself saying his mom was important, or worse, I'd be the one criticized. Feeling the limit with such a husband, I managed to keep working by leaving my son with my parents, who live nearby. This time, my trip coincided with my parents' vacation, so I had no choice but to emphasize to my husband the importance of his care. And now, this has happened. What if something had happened to our son? Does he even realize what he's done? So he can neglect his child to this extent? Is this the kind of man you are? I'm so disappointed. If so, you're no longer family to me. I kept speaking to my son. It's okay. You won't have to feel this lonely again. Mom will make sure of it. My name is Hazel. I'm a 32-year-old salesperson at a trading company dealing in machinery for businesses. My world is tough, with frequent business trips and entertaining clients, but I enjoy increasing sales and building a network across the country. I've been dedicated to the sales department since I joined as a new graduate. My husband, Tristan, works in the planning department of a subsidiary of my company. We seldom meet due to working in different offices, but we met at a large company drinking party and hit it off. After a few months of going out for drinks as friends, his transfer to my head office naturally led to us seeing each other more often. We already got along well, and this closeness led to a relationship. Years passed, and just when we started thinking about marriage, I found out I was pregnant. Though unexpected, marriage had already been on the cards, so we hurriedly visited both our families to break the news. Tristan's dad had passed away before I met him, and Sophia lived alone. Nervous, I carefully chose a gift and dressed meticulously, paying close attention to every detail, as I headed to his childhood home. However, my efforts seemed in vain, as Sophia's reception was cold. From the moment she opened the door, she looked at me as if I was an intruder, barely smiling. The coffee she served was surprisingly hot and weak. As Tristan explained our relationship, the pregnancy, and our marriage plans to Sophia, I kept a steady smile, not wanting to intrude on their conversation. I just wanted to show Sophia that I wasn't a harmful presence. It's one thing to plan a marriage, but to have a child first? That's really disappointing. Sophia muttered, glaring at me. Aren't you also involved with other men, carelessly and without class? Honestly, I can't approve. She said bluntly, Tristan, flustered, tried to convince her.
It's not like that at all. Hazel has been dedicated to her work before and after we started dating. She's hardworking, serious, and definitely not into playing around with men.
His earnest defense made me smile unintentionally. True to his words, I had been so focused on my job that I hardly had any romantic relationships. My closeness with Tristan stemmed from work, and I never had the leisure to play around. If I had free time, I would rather spend it studying to improve my work.
If you say so, Tristan, I trust you.
But this all work and no play? Women shouldn't push themselves too hard. Trying to imitate men without knowing one's limits is also bad manners, don't you think? Sophia continued to grumble, but ultimately agreed to the marriage. I anticipated disapproval due to the pregnancy, but being criticized for my career commitment was quite a shock. Maybe Sophia's generation couldn't understand a woman like me, but her attitude had been cold from the start. I was already filled with doubts about whether we could get along well in the future. We might face opposition to our marriage, huh? The walk home was rainy. Hiding my downcast face under my umbrella, I murmured, and Tristan laughed it off in a carefree manner.
She ultimately agreed, right? Mom's been living alone and doesn't meet people often. She was probably just nervous meeting someone new after a long time. She'll be fine when she gets used to you.
His cheerful voice resonated even amidst the rain. He might be trying to cheer me up, or maybe he genuinely wasn't bothered. His words made me reconsider my negative thoughts. I shouldn't judge someone based on first impressions. That's something I've always learned in my career. We still have a long way to go. Then we quickly proceeded with our wedding preparations, issued our marriage certificate, and moved into our new home. We chose a location convenient for commuting and close to my parents' home. I wanted to continue working even after having a child, so having reliable support nearby was essential. Tristan happily agreed to help out. During that time, I didn't have much interaction with Sophia. Whether she avoided me because she felt uncomfortable, or if it was out of respect for our family, I couldn't tell. Time flew by, and as my belly grew, I took maternity leave and parental leave. The company regretted my long absence, and I was concerned whether someone could fill in for me. Above all, I loved my work, and it was hard to leave. Juggling pregnancy and career was an endless struggle, but as I deliberated, the baby inside me kept growing. I promised to return to work and began my leave. Soon after, I gave birth to a healthy baby boy. Tristan, along with my parents, rushed to celebrate.
Congratulations, you did great. Seeing my first grandchild's face brings me so much joy,
my mom said tearfully. Tristan held the baby awkwardly and mused.
It's a boy. I wonder what he'll grow up to be. But as long as he's healthy, that's all that matters.
We named our son Scott. Saying Scott and us brought a flutter of happiness. After Scott and I returned from the hospital, Tristan, despite his busy schedule, helped a lot at home and took active care in looking after the baby. Caring for a newborn was tough, but Tristan was incredibly dedicated. You're a great dad, Tristan, I said jokingly, and he nodded in satisfaction.
Mom raised me like this. It makes me want to do my best, too,
he replied. That's when I should have felt more uneasy, talking about our family and Scott, yet Sophia's presence kept creeping into our conversations. But I didn't pay much attention to it and said, "It's going to be a long journey of parenting, but let's support each other." We lived harmoniously after that. Finding a childcare center for Scott was tough, so I extended my parental leave and immersed myself in parenting. Time flew, and Scott began to sit up, eat solid food, and grow stronger. Tristan, busy with work, started coming home early and helping around the house. He really had been, until recently. As Scott turned 1, Tristan's initial dedication slowly faded. He still came home early, but he stopped helping with the house or Scott, instead increasing his phone calls with Sophia. His conversations with me also revolved around Sophia. How she seemed lonely without friends, or how she didn't feel like cooking alone. This wasn't occasional, it became a daily occurrence, and I began to feel exhausted. I don't think it's wrong for him to communicate with his mom, but I wish he would spend more time on our immediate family. He was so enthusiastic when Scott was born. Why the change? When I struggled to feed our child who still had trouble communicating, I could hear Tristan talking on the phone with Sophia, his voice full of joy, a stone's throw away from me. That cheerful tone only intensified my irritation. Then, as another year passed, things got even worse. We used to have dinner together on weekdays and go out with Scott on weekends, but now Tristan spends most of his time at his parents' house. His parents' home is a drive away from his office. On weekdays, he heads straight there from work and doesn't return until after midnight. On weekends, I receive messages like, "Going straight to my parents from work." And even when I reply, "I'd like to spend weekends as a family," I'm met with silence. When I try calling, he dismissively says, "Sorry, I'm busy right now. Mom's house had a light bulb issue, and I'm fixing it." Indeed, Sophia might not be able to handle everything alone, but does he really need to be there every night for such trivial reasons? I could feel the blood vessels in my head pulsating with frustration.
Mom can't do heavy shopping alone. I help her with detergents, bulky condiments, and big purchases. She's alone, and I'm her only son. I have to help, right?
He'd justify. Phone calls and messages have proven he's indeed at his parents'. Not cheating, perhaps that's a silver lining. Yet the fact remains he's hardly at home. Why can't Sophia let go of her son? Even though she's elderly, she could manage on her own or seek external help. Even if she relies on Tristan, she should let him go once his tasks are done. Why does she need him there all the time? I recall her cold treatment towards me when we first visited to announce our marriage. Amidst these troubling thoughts, I found myself in virtually solo parenting. Despite my confidence and physical strength for my sales job, frustration mounted, and a cloud of gloom loomed over me. One day, when Tristan was at home, I confronted him seriously. "When you're always away, it's tough to manage everything at home. I'm lonely, and Scott needs to see more of his dad. Please increase our family time." That day, a torrential downpour surrounded our house, with the relentless sound of heavy rain beating against the windows. Tristan averted his gaze and made excuses with a twisted mouth.
What can I do if Mom is in trouble? She's at an age where managing the house and shopping alone is tough. You should understand that, right?
Maybe, but how about managing the difficult tasks for her in one go and spending other weekends with us? What about finding a balance? I suggested, trying to calm down an agitated Tristan. I didn't outright deny his reasons, but offered an alternative, a strategy I learned from work.
So you're saying I should schedule my visits and neglect her the rest of the time?
Tristan snapped back, becoming more emotional despite my attempt at a peaceful discussion.
How many times do I have to say it? Mom is lonely, living alone without many acquaintances. Don't you feel sorry for her? It's always about you. You don't care about my family.
That's too much. Please, let's calm down and talk this out, I pleaded. Tristan, leaping to conclusions and emotional, stood up from his chair with a loud noise, as if to end the conversation. Feeling hurt by his harsh words, I desperately sought a discussion. We needed to calmly discuss how we would manage our family and include Sophia in our plans. But with such an attitude, it was troubling. It seemed childishly immature for an adult, and I was honestly disappointed that this was the level of my husband's maturity. Outside, the thunderstorm intensified, and the roar of thunder began to echo. At the sound of a loud thunderclap, Scott started crying in fear. "It's okay. It was just thunder, I said, rushing to comfort him. When Tristan's phone rang, after a brief conversation, he casually said,
Mom can't prepare dinner because of the bad weather. I'm going over.
And left. While soothing a frightened Scott and preparing dinner, I heard the door close and felt a headache coming on. I had just expressed my feelings. How could he disregard them so casually? Sophia was no better. Didn't she prepare any meals in advance? Every night, every weekend, endlessly keeping her son tied to her side. If her health was indeed so poor that living alone was challenging, there were hospitals and support services she could rely on. Yet I never heard such a suggestion from Tristan. Just like the storm outside, a cold tempest raged within me. In this unchanging situation, I finally managed to secure a place at a childcare center a few months later and decided to return to work. After a 2-year break, I was back at work, desperately trying to regain my professional instinct in the limited time I had. When work overlapped with childcare hours, I relied on my parents who lived nearby. Ideally, I would have preferred Tristan's help, but he was still absorbed in his parents' house. My parents, though disapproving of Tristan's behavior, happily took care of Scott, their beloved grandson. Scott, you're growing so fast every time I see you. Children grow up so quickly, my mom said, lovingly preparing his favorite dishes. Her words were a warm solace to my worn-out heart. I started rebuilding relationships with the staff who replaced me during my leave and with clients, gradually increasing my sales figures again as a salesperson.
It's rare to find a female employee who can do so much while raising a young child. You're really something.
My boss praised me. Gradually, I started to go on business trips again. Initially, I was troubled, but refusing them meant I couldn't continue my job, so I reluctantly asked my parents to take Scott overnight. They happily prepared a sleeping area, towels, and various things for Scott, and he seemed to enjoy staying at a different place. Time passed, and Scott entered elementary school. He was an excited first grader, his backpack looking oversized on his small frame. We would leave home together in the morning, then after school he'd either go to an after-school program or to my parents' house, and we would return home together in the evening. That became the flow of our life. Scott was calm compared to other kids his age, preferring to play with train toys and observing plants rather than engaging in rough play or using harsh language. His friends were mostly gentle boys and girls. Mom, today at school, I was looking for caterpillars in the garden. Scott would earnestly tell me these stories, and I found him incredibly endearing. It's truly regrettable that Tristan, living in the same house, doesn't try to see his child's growth. Then, one day, an urgent business trip came up. I was supposed to leave straight from work on Friday, visit clients in different regions, and return home Sunday evening. Thinking it was too much with a 6-year-old son, I tried to adjust the schedule, but due to the client's immovable circumstances, I had to stick to the plan. As usual, I explained the situation to my parents, asking if they could keep him for a longer period. Mom, looking sorry, said, I'm really sorry, but we're going on a trip from Friday. Everything's already arranged. Are you okay? Should we cancel? I quickly shook my head. If that's the case, I'll figure something out. Don't cancel your trip. You rarely get such opportunities. Go and enjoy. When I smiled, Mom kept saying, I'm sorry, but I smiled relieved. Later, she mentioned they were going to a resort. I hoped they'd enjoy themselves and recharge from their daily fatigue. Then, I talked to Tristan about this. I need you to take care of Scott this weekend. My parents will be away, and you're the only one I can ask. He's 6 now, so it shouldn't be as hard as when he was a baby. Tristan, sitting on the sofa, crossing his legs and watching TV, looked reluctant.
But I can't just leave Mom alone.
Not this again. I tried to stay utterly calm and spoke. It's just from this Friday to Sunday evening. I can't leave Scott with my parents. You can take care of whatever Mom needs before then. Please, just this weekend, stay home and take care of Scott.
I guess so.
Tristan repeated his non-committal response. Is it really so hard for him to spend just 3 days away from Sophia and with his own son? I controlled my growing irritation and asked Tristan to handle things with Sophia in advance. I'm counting on you. This Friday, Saturday, and until Sunday evening, you're responsible for Scott. I emphasized and hurried to prepare for the trip. I remembered the promise we made when Scott was a baby, to work together on the long journey of parenting. Were those words just a lie? It was heartbreaking to see how much Tristan had changed. The business trip was incredibly hard. I flew to clients, attended dinner meetings after negotiations, and then collapsed into sleep at the hotel. The next day involved attending a large-scale training from morning till evening. On the final day, Sunday, I participated in golf and dinner for entertainment after an early morning flight, and by the time I got home, the day was already turning to dusk. The day was clear, and the setting sun painted the sky orange. The sinking sun illuminated my apartment, almost dazzling. I was returning home after 3 days. As I was about to open the door, saying I'm back, I found it unexpectedly locked. Would Tristan lock the door when he's home? With a slight doubt, I unlocked and opened the door. The house was eerily silent. Hello? But there was no reply from Tristan, not even the sound of a TV. The curtains were drawn, blocking the evening sun. Maybe Tristan and Scott went out for some fresh air. That thought in mind, I opened the living room door. What I saw there left me speechless. In the deserted living room, Scott sat alone, silent. The room was dark with no lights or TV on, and Scott was quietly looking at a book on the sofa. The scene was so lonely, sad, and frightening. Scott! Dropping my bag, I ran to him shouting. Why was Scott alone? There was no sign of Tristan. It was clear he was out. Had he left Scott behind to go out alone? Mom? Scott noticed me, closed his book, and clung to me. He must have been lonely, tears brimming in his eyes. What happened? Why are you alone? Where's Dad? Did he go shopping? Seeing my barrage of questions, Scott's face turned red, as if he was about to cry. Struggling to speak, he sobbed. I felt a pain in my heart. Sorry. I shouldn't ask so much at once. Where's Dad? What happened? I hugged Scott and asked again. He answered between sobs. Grandma and they went away. What? I couldn't help but exclaim. Grandma here must mean Sophia. Really? To Grandma's house, leaving you behind? Scott shook his little head and continued. Not home, on a trip to Italy. There were only 2 tickets, so I had to wait alone. After finishing, Scott continued to cry. The book he dropped made a soft sound as it hit the floor. When did they leave? This morning. Holding Scott tightly, I was filled with rage. That man, he knew that leaving meant Scott would be alone, and yet he cheerfully left with Sophia. If it weren't in front of my child, I'd scream out loud. A trip to Italy? I wasn't informed about this at all. If it had been something planned from before, Tristan would have used it as an excuse to refuse to take care of Scott, so it must have been decided abruptly. Why now, of all times? And wasn't Sophia so weak that she could barely shop on her own? If she can manage an Italian trip, requiring nearly 10 hours on a plane, she must be full of energy. I could somewhat accept it if Tristan had taken Scott with him when he went out with Sophia, but leaving behind his own 6-year-old son to go overseas with Sophia? I was disappointed by his lack of responsibility as a father and a human being. It must have been hard for you. You must have felt so lonely. I continued to speak to Scott. It's okay. You won't have to feel this lonely anymore. Mom will take care of everything. I resolved. I decided to give up on Tristan. To think he could disregard his own child to such an extent. Was he always this kind of man? I'm truly disappointed. If that's the case, he's no longer family to me. Several days had passed. After taking a day off as compensatory leave, I went about my commute as usual, and in the evenings I lived happily while my parents looked after Scott. Every day my mobile phone was bombarded with dozens of calls from Tristan. I wasn't ready to speak to Tristan yet, no matter how many hundreds of times he called. I just couldn't bring myself to answer. I had been ignoring it all this time. On the 5th day, I finally thought it was time to talk and whimsically answered what must have been the 100th and something call. As soon as I pressed the call button, Tristan's angry voice came bursting through.
Hazel, where the hell are you right now?
His voice was so loud, it felt like my eardrums would burst. Frowning, I moved the phone away from my ear for a moment. Then, with a firm voice, I told him the truth. I'm at my parents' house. Scott and I have moved here. Yes, the day Scott was left at home, I had decided to stop being a family with Tristan and ran to my parents' house the next day. It turned out my parents' trip was a celebration for their 60th birthdays. They had returned home the day before I got back from my business trip and welcomed me immediately. Hearing the whole story, my parents were angrier than they had ever been. Leaving 6-year-old Scott at home alone. Anything could have happened. It's too dangerous. You can move in with me right away. You should cut ties with that husband. After the call about it, Mom flew over to our house and helped me with the moving preparations. My dad also came over furious, saying,
He's unbelievable. He doesn't deserve to be Scott's dad or your husband,
while helping with the heavy lifting. And now, 5 days after we moved, I'm on the phone with Tristan. On the phone with Tristan, I continued. Did you enjoy your trip to Italy with Sophia? Leaving Scott alone at home to go on a trip? How could you? What if something had happened? Do you realize what you've done? I can't be a family with you anymore. That's why I left. I have the divorce papers ready, so please sign them soon. As I was about to hang up, Tristan protested from the other end.
This is crazy. It's too one-sided.
Reluctantly, I continued the conversation. Who's being unreasonable? Didn't I ask you to take care of Scott? Then why did you choose to go on a trip with Sophia instead?
It's like Sophia saw some movie set in Italy and wanted to go there,
he explained. A movie? I raised my voice in disbelief, which caught the attention of my parents and Scott in the house. The reason for their sudden trip to Italy was film tourism, an absurd and distorted justification. Even if you wanted to visit the movie setting, why that day? Any other weekend would have been fine. You're always leaving us for Sophia anyway, I argued.
Don't get so worked up. It's annoying. Mom wanted to go, so of course I went with her,
he replied nonchalantly. His response and attitude, prioritizing Sophia and ignoring everything else, made me dizzy. Even if you wanted to go on the trip, wasn't there an option to take 3 tickets and bring Scott along? I asked one last question. If he wanted to be with Sophia while taking care of Scott, he could have brought him along. Well, being suddenly taken to Italy would be troublesome, but it's better than being left alone. Being under parental supervision is a small mercy. At my legitimate question, Tristan replied lazily.
But taking care of a kid is boring. I managed for 2 days, but by the 3rd morning, I couldn't handle it anymore. It was too much.
I felt darkness closing in. Does he not understand what parenting is? What does he think of his own child? Does he realize how irresponsible and inhuman his statement is? My anger exceeded its limit, and I felt my heart growing cold. Without responding to Tristan's words, I silently ended the call. There's no talking to this man. I couldn't be a family, nor did I want any relationship with him as a person. I decided to handle the details of the divorce through a lawyer. When I shared this phone conversation with my parents, my enraged dad nearly flipped the table. which my mom and I managed to stop. There was also a moment when my mom, heartbroken, cried inconsolably, and Scott and I comforted her. With that, I began the process of formally filing for divorce. 2 weeks later, Tristan protested.
Wait a minute. We just got back from Italy and have no money. How can I pay this compensation for the divorce?
During the meeting about the divorce with Tristan, Sophia, and our lawyers, I presented the divorce application and the affidavit for the compensation money. Tristan became infuriated, saying,
Why should I pay compensation just for going on a trip with Mom?
The lawyer explained,
In principle, spouses have a duty of cooperation and support. Tristan's complete lack of involvement in family and childcare duties constitutes a breach of this duty, entitling Hazel to claim compensation.
As I nodded in agreement, the lawyer presented another document to Tristan, my bank account statement.
Tristan, it appears you have been spending Hazel's living expenses without her permission for your mother. Is there any mistake in this statement? What? That's necessary. Mom is my family too. What's wrong with using our living expenses for her? Anyway, I don't have the money to pay this compensation. Do you know how much the Italy trip cost us?
As Tristan grumbled, I took my turn to speak. About that trip to Italy, I started, revealing something I discovered while living at my parents' house. The trip was paid for using our savings, not from our living expenses account, but from a separate one meant for Scott's future. How could you do this? I can't believe it. We had been saving separately for Scott since discovering my pregnancy. Yet Tristan used that money for a trip to Italy, leaving Scott behind. As I clenched my fists in frustration, Sophia looked uncomfortable beside Tristan, spoke up timidly. Tristan, you keep saying we have no money, but that trip didn't cost tens of thousands of dollars, did it? Stung by her words, Tristan turned to her. Sophia's statement, although true, was ironic. The very person who'd been luring Tristan away from our family was now pointing out this fact. Sophia, even for small household items, and a trip to Italy costing a few $1,000s, you didn't have the savings. I delivered the final blow. Tristan gritted his teeth in frustration, and Sophia, surprised, spoke out. What? Tristan, you said you earned well in your planning job at a renowned company. You couldn't even pay for the Italy trip with your own money? I nodded and addressed Sophia. Yes, Tristan hardly had any savings. He mostly does back office work and planning, and I earn more than him. I can't believe this. Tristan lied to me. He has no savings and earns less than you? Although I was irked by being referred to as that woman, my focus was on Tristan. I did ask for Tristan's help with shopping, because my old age pension isn't enough. I thought I was simply relying on my successful son. To depend on your earnings? Oh, how embarrassing! Sophia exaggeratedly covered her face, feigning tears. Tristan stood up hastily, trying to console her.
Mom, it's not like that. I said I earned well to reassure you. And about the shopping, it's my duty to buy what Mom wants. Our home's money is as much mine as it is Hazel's. Is it such a big deal? Be quiet. I've been telling everyone how much you earn. And even if it's about money, I don't want to have anything to do with that woman.
As Tristan made excuses, Sophia's voice overpowered his. Don't you feel ashamed as a man? I don't remember raising such a pathetic son.
Huh? I did everything for you, Mom. How can you say that now?
A mama's boy husband who clings to Sophia and neglects his family. Sophia who looked down on me, his wife, and tried to monopolize Tristan's time and money. I watched her baseless quarrel with cold eyes. Eventually, I intervened in their pointless argument. Sophia, I'm sorry to upset you, but I'll be filing a compensation claim against you too. Hearing this, Sophia's eyes widened. Why are you involved in this? Compensation. What have I done to you? Every day and all weekend, you kept Tristan confined to your house, making him neglect his duties at home. Plus, unknowingly to me, you spent my money through Tristan. Even on expensive brand bags and clothes, that was my money. I looked at the lawyer, who nodded and presented Sophia with the compensation claim. Don't be ridiculous. A frivolous and tasteless woman who appeared out of nowhere and got pregnant before marriage has no right to speak to me. Sophia yelled, spitting in anger. I didn't know, so it can't be helped. I thought my son was showing his gratitude to me. Earning freely, overshadowing your son, and then not letting me use your money? How awful. I should have stopped the marriage back then. Having such an ugly woman as my son's wife. Oh, it's the worst. Sophia, isn't that way of speaking a bit too much? Reaching my limit with her vulgar insults, I retorted to Sophia. It's not about gender or money. It's about capability. I have the ability to earn, and your son lacked it. That's all. Even if it were his money, spending it lavishly as a parent is questionable. Sophia screamed. Be quiet. I don't need lectures from a kid. I said firmly. Which of us is the real ugly one, Sophia? The one who judges people by gender and wealth, or the one who works hard and earns respect? Sophia tried to lunge at me across the table. At that moment, the lawyer cleared his throat loudly, signaling the end of the discussion.
You may have your opinions, but this compensation amount has been legally determined, so please accept it. Any remaining issues should be handled through my law firm.
The lawyer forcefully concluded a situation that could have turned into a three-way fight. I left the meeting and returned home to Scott and my parents. Tristan and Sophia were still arguing as they disappeared into the city. Mom, welcome back. Scott ran to me as I returned. My parents, worried about me, listened to today's events, sometimes angry, sometimes sad. At least now we could finally have a peaceful life. The current house where I live with my parents isn't the house where I grew up. The old house was demolished, the land sold, and a few years ago, considering the future, we moved to this barrier-free home. In the kitchen, Mom was preparing dinner, and I joined her to cook a steaming hot stew. Around the warm meal, we enjoyed a pleasant family time. Scott, smiling, talked about his day at school. It was the birth of a warm and restful home. Tristan, still working at the same head office, became the subject of rumors among the staff. Tristan and Sophia, burdened with the compensation payment, continued their lavish lifestyle without reducing their living standards. They spent extravagantly on trips inspired by movies and expensive brand clothes, racking up considerable debt within months. They had already spent the inheritance from father-in-law, and eventually had to sell the house and land father-in-law left. Reluctantly, Tristan and Sophia moved into a cheap apartment. Even with Tristan's income, they struggled to pay off debts, forcing Sophia to take up part-time work. Sophia, valuing status and age, found it hard to adjust to taking instructions from younger supervisors and colleagues, working with a sense of humiliation to pay off debts. After the divorce, rumors about Tristan's debt and his mama's boy behavior became widespread. Unable to endure the ridicule for being the ex-husband of a successful woman and a mama's boy, Tristan eventually resigned voluntarily. Overwhelmed with the stress from working under younger colleagues and hearing daily complaints from Sophia, Tristan's mental health deteriorated, making it difficult to find a new job. His physical and mental state affected his appearance and attitude, and he remained unemployed. Eventually, he had to settle for a low-paying, irregular job, working tirelessly to pay off debts and the compensation. This way, the one-on-one parent-child time Sophia so desired to steal from me won't be achievable for a while. Forced into long hours of low-wage work, the two are living in poverty to pay off debts and compensation. As for my family and me, things were different. Mom, what's going on? Dinner looks amazing today, I exclaimed as I saw the feast on the table after returning from work. Heaps of fried chicken, a vibrant salad with lettuce, tomatoes, and eggs, a steaming soup full of ingredients, and even a small pizza. It's to celebrate your promotion to section chief. Mom's happy voice came from the kitchen. I continued to excel in my fulfilling job, earning trust from my subordinates and peers, leading to my promotion. Hearing this, Mom quickly made a feast for us. "Hey, I helped microwave the pizza," Scott proudly announced, running up to me. I patted his head, and he laughed joyfully.
"I never thought my daughter would turn out so well,"
Dad said. Mom interjected. "Well, work isn't just about being smart, right? It's about trust. Hazel's honest and straightforward character has really resonated with people." Hearing that, I felt tears welling up. I have people who watch over my way of life, a family that praises my character, the ability to watch Scott grow up healthy. Mom, thank you. And Dad, too. Sorry for all the trouble. I'll work even harder for the both of you. Mom gently stroked my back as I wiped my tears. Scott came over and hugged me, saying, "Mom, I love you." When Eddie proposed to me, my mother and I were invited to his parents' house. As soon as we arrived, his parents, barely exchanging pleasantries, started questioning my mother about her background. When she shared that she dropped out of college to have me and raised me alone, Eddie's mother splashed coffee over her head. "A mother who didn't even go to college? The engagement's off." After being kicked out of the living room, I realized I'd left my handkerchief behind. Returning with my mom, just as we were about to open the door, I heard Eddie's voice.
"Compared to Shy, Catherine would be better, right? Her parents and she are all college graduates."
"Your real preference? She's way better than this current girl."
"So we're okay with the engagement?"
"I guess we have no choice." Everything went dark before my eyes. My mother flung the door open with force. Entering the living room, my mom, who picked up the handkerchief, glared at Eddie's parents. "Well then, I guess I'll just have to ruin your company." As we walked towards the station, my sadness slowly turned into a boiling rage. "Just you wait. I'll make you regret ever dumping me." My name is Shy, a 40-year-old housewife. Ever since graduating from college, I've worked nonstop, and before I knew it, I was in my late 30s. I was never really interested in dating. Even as my friends got married one by one, I felt no rush. But then, last year, when a friend visited with her baby, my mother, holding the baby and poking its chubby arms and cheeks, looked so wistfully sad. That's when I realized it. Though she never rushed me, my kind mother had always longed to hold her grandchild. Sometime after that, Eddie joined our company. He seemed to be the heir of a well-known local business. Our boss knew Eddie's father, and Eddie came to work with us for a while to learn the ropes. Tall and gentle, Eddie had the air of someone who had been raised with care. Of course, he caught the attention of the female staff. I wasn't particularly interested in Eddie, but as we worked on projects together, we became friends and had lunch a few times. One day, about half a year later, while eating, I noticed Eddie was eating less than usual and found it odd. Then, he awkwardly asked me,
Shy, do you have someone you're seeing?"
"No, I've been all about work and missed my chance to marry." I laughed it off, but Eddie got serious.
"It's just a lack of opportunity. Anyone as beautiful and capable as you?"
I was stunned, and Eddie turned red to his neck.
"Would I be no good?"
"What?"
"I've only had eyes for you these past 6 months. Would you consider dating me?"
I had developed a fondness for Eddie's serious approach to work. However, since he was 5 years younger, I had never considered him romantically, so his confession took me by surprise. Yet his apparent lack of experience with women touched my heart, and I decided to date Eddie. But once we started dating, I began to feel numerous discomforts. Eddie, seemingly gentle and laid back, turned out to be incredibly indecisive and dependent on his mother. In a restaurant, when it took him over 10 minutes to choose from the menu, and he still couldn't decide. He resorted to calling his mother for help.
Mom, did you see the picture I sent? Pesto or carbonara? Which should I pick? I can't decide between seafood or meat as the main. What would you do, Mom?
And eventually, he would just go with whatever his mother decided. Moreover, as our relationship progressed, Eddie started reporting every detail of our dates to his mother. He would send her pictures of our meals and even our date plans and the time we'd return home. Eddie, you're really close with your mom, huh? I said slightly sarcastically, to which Eddie beamed.
In our house, it's a rule to have dinner together as a family. When I have dinner out with you, Mom waits for me with just some snacks and drinks. That's why I always tell her when I'll be home.
I thought it unnecessary to report every single destination, but I kept my dissatisfaction to myself. To be honest, until his confession, I hadn't really considered him in a romantic light. But since we started dating, I was increasingly drawn to his kind nature and his friendly smile. Watching him distract fussing children in a store with funny faces, or gently explaining how to use the self-checkout to elderly customers warmed my heart. He was a gentleman, kind, loved children, serious about his work, and admired by colleagues. A perfect future husband.
By the way, what's your curfew, Shy?
Curfew? I almost dropped my fork at his question during dinner. I live alone, so I don't have one. I had a 9 p.m. curfew in high school, but that was lifted once I became an adult.
Ours is 9 p.m.
Wait, you have a curfew? I was astonished, but Eddie just smiled and nodded.
Yeah, so if I work late, I can't go on dates. Let's try to finish work early, okay?
Sure. I forced a smile, hiding my discomfort. Eddie, perhaps unintentionally, sometimes made statements that felt like he was looking down on me. As the heir to a company, Eddie had been cherished by his parents since he was young. He went to a private mission school from kindergarten, following an escalator system through to university, growing up in an environment akin to that of a famous celebrity. His hobbies were piano and violin. Instead of attending cram school, he had private tutors since he was young. No wonder he was so different in demeanor and speech from my male classmates, who went to soccer and swimming classes. Whenever I talked about my childhood, Eddie would narrow his eyes, almost in a mocking way.
I guess you wouldn't get along with your classmates. They seem, not savage, but overly energetic.
Comments like that made me hesitant to open up about my background. I only told him I was raised by a single mother, keeping the details secret from Eddie. I've never known my father. When my mother, still a college student, told her senior she was pregnant, he left school and disappeared. My mother dropped out of college to have me, raising me with help from her family while working tirelessly. I'm proud of my gentle yet strong-willed mother and my background. But with Eddie's vastly different upbringing, I was scared of his reaction and struggled to share my story. Even after we started dating, we kept it a secret at work.
Let's not tell our boss until we're engaged.
But it seems it'll be obvious soon.
I don't want to be teased by colleagues. If someone points it out, then we'll admit it.
Okay, got it. Out of respect for Eddie's feelings, we continued to address each other by our last names at work and made sure not to act too familiar. Naturally, female colleagues, thinking Eddie was single, flocked around him. Most were attracted to his status as the future president, flattering him. It bothered me, but Eddie, being kind, never brushed them off harshly, always responding with a smile. Among them was one female employee who particularly targeted me. Catherine, from the same development team. Catherine, incompetent at her job, was known for buttering up male superiors, which made her unpopular among other women. After Eddie joined, she would sidle up to him with upturned eyes and a sweet voice, frequently touching him. When I pointed out her repeated mistakes, Catherine became visibly upset, making excuses. A little under the weather today. Shy, you really need to help me out more. I've explained it to you multiple times and told you to do the final check, right? Ah, yes, I'll be more careful next time. Even when I complained to Eddie about Catherine's excessive behavior, kind-hearted Eddie just looked troubled.
She's young, you know. We should watch over her with a warm heart.
But she's already 30. And in this job for 7 years? Isn't that too lenient? I thought. Moreover, Catherine started inviting Eddie for lunch frequently, taking advantage of his kindness. When I protested, Eddie responded with annoyance.
She wants to learn about work from me. You have dinner with me, so it's fine, right?
As expected, rumors started that Catherine and Eddie were dating. Yet when asked by colleagues, Eddie gave vague responses and didn't firmly deny it.
Ah, caught on. Actually, I prefer older women.
Frustrated with Catherine playing along with the rumor, Eddie just said,
That kind of girl is a hassle if you provoke her. The rumor will die down eventually. Just ignore it.
It seemed right, but Eddie continued having lunches with Catherine. However, since it was work-related, I had no choice but to keep silent. Despite feeling uneasy, I had to trust Eddie. On our first anniversary, Eddie surprised me with an engagement ring during a lavish dinner. My heart was full with a formal proposal. Thank goodness, Eddie chose me, not Catherine. Tearing up with joy and relief, Eddie shyly said,
I want to introduce you to my parents next time.
Of course I agreed, eagerly awaiting the words. Once parents-in-law approved our marriage, we'd register it and announce it at the company. That should make even the brazen Catherine give up. Before meeting parents-in-law, I first invited Eddie to my mother's house. She already knew about my relationship and the recent proposal, so she happily welcomed Eddie. Sorry for the old, cramped house.
No.
Eddie looked around the old interior with interest, and my mother said apologetically. I had already told her about Eddie's background, so she was probably being considerate. I always hear about you from Shy. You seem really kind. Taking the opportunity, my mother shared with Eddie how she became a single mother. When she revealed that my father disappeared and she dropped out of college to have me, Eddie looked a bit surprised. We spent a pleasant time sipping coffee my mother made. She can be too outspoken, but she's a good, honest girl at heart. Please take care of Shy.
No, Shy is dependable and comfortable to be with.
I saw Eddie off to the station, then returned to my mother's house for dinner. Soon, the day of the family meeting with parents-in-law arrived. Mother and I, dressed in modest dresses, nervously rode in Eddie's car to his parents' house. We walked through the grand gate, along the cobblestone path towards the entrance. We were led into a formal living room. A large garden spread beyond the windows. Sitting opposite parents-in-law, I felt uneasy. Since entering the house, they had been glaring at my mother with piercing eyes. Trying to ease the tension, mother-in-law served coffee, and as I sipped to moisten my throat, father-in-law asked with a stiff face,
Is it true that the highest level of education you completed doesn't include college?
Ah, yes. I got pregnant with her during college and dropped out to raise her alone.
See? Just as Eddie told us.
Oh, yes. Frowning mother-in-law also questioned my mother. So the father ran away, did he? Well, yes, that's right. My mother chuckled bitterly. I bristled inside. What does any of this have to do with Eddie's marriage? I was about to protest when mother-in-law grabbed my mother's cup and threw it on her head. In shock, my mother and I could only stare as mother-in-law ridiculed us. A mother who didn't even go to college? The engagement is off. It would tarnish our family's reputation, she added. Beside mother-in-law, father-in-law nodded, arms crossed, as if it was the most natural conclusion. I looked at Eddie, hoping for support, but he just gave a slight laugh.
If Mom says no, then I guess it can't be helped. Now, please leave.
Overwhelmed by father-in-law's decisive tone, we were stunned as we stepped into the hallway. Behind us, the door snapped shut. My mother and I walked down the corridor, leading to the entrance, eyes fixed on our feet. After a while, my mother spoke softly. "I'm sorry, Shy. It's all because of me." "Don't be silly. It's not your fault. I was the one who couldn't see through them." "That's right. It's better to find out what kind of people they are before getting married. It's frustrating to back down now, but we need to dry your hair. At least the coffee was lukewarm. Oh, I left my handkerchief in the room." It was a lace handkerchief my mother had given me for my birthday. I hated to go back, but there was no guarantee Eddie would return it. As my mother and I were about to open the door, Eddie's voice reached us.
Right. Compared to Shy, Catherine is better, isn't she? Her parents and she both graduated from college. Plus, she's young, so she'll likely have kids soon. As a wife, as well as her parents, should have suitable backgrounds for our family,
Father-in-law said, passionately discussing with Eddie, to which mother-in-law reluctantly replied, "The girl you brought last time. You've been dating for 6 months, right? Well, she's much better than the current one."
So can I get engaged?
"It can't be helped. Let's set a date for the next family meeting."
Lucky you, Eddie. Thanks, Mom and Dad.
Everything went dark before my eyes. Wait, was Eddie two-timing me? Was today's family meeting meant to use me as a comparison to get mother-in-law's approval for marrying Catherine? As I stood frozen, my mother burst open the door. Stepping in front of a stunned Eddie and parents-in-law, she knelt to pick up the handkerchief. Standing up, my mother glared at the parents-in-law with fierce eyes and declared in a resonating voice, "Well then, I guess I'll just have to ruin your company."
What?
"Let's go, Shy." I followed my mother as she strode out of Eddie's house. Walking towards the station, sadness turned into a boiling rage. Unforgivable. I won't let this go. Just you wait. I'll make you regret ever dumping me. Despite heading home in a state of seething anger, once I calmed down, anxiety crept in. Eddie was, after all, a colleague in the same department. It would be awkward tomorrow. How should I face him? After a restless night, I went to work the next day, only to be surprised by Eddie greeting me as usual. With his usual affable smile, unconcerned, while I, with my sleep-deprived puffy eyes, felt foolish. So I decided to treat it all as just work and interact with Eddie as if nothing had happened. But that evening, Eddie started sending a flurry of excuse-filled texts.
I didn't fall out of love with you. It was just bad timing that I met Catherine after meeting you. I should have just said I found someone I really liked and wanted to break up, but I kept putting it off because it was hard to say. I proposed on a whim and was regretting it. I feel relieved now that I've come clean. I hope we can pretend this never happened. It might affect my career if it gets out at the office. Let's continue being good colleagues like before.
I was so dismayed by Eddie's self-centeredness that I was speechless. Ignoring his messages made him call persistently after work.
Shy, you're listening to these voicemails, right? Why won't you answer? We didn't break off our engagement to become strangers, right? It feels lonely to be ignored. I just want to be friends like before. Call me back. It's just common courtesy for working adults.
Fed up, I showed the text to my mother and played her the voicemails to discuss what to do next. After making him wait for a week, when I finally answered his call, Eddie sounded delighted.
Shy, you finally answered. I thought you had blocked me.
Eddie, I want to visit your parents' house again.
That's a bit.
I proposed a plan to the hesitant Eddie. I want to return the engagement ring. And about this incident, I can write a statement saying I won't talk about it at work. Wouldn't that reassure your parents?
Okay, I'll ask my mom.
That evening, Eddie texted me. He agreed to let me visit his parents' house one last time. My mother and I prepared meticulously for the visit the following weekend. When we arrived, Catherine was already there. Seeing me, she looked shocked. Shy, why are you here?
I didn't invite Catherine,
Eddie said in a panic. I invited her. It's better if all involved are present. Catherine, you want to see me return Eddie's ring, don't you?
I do want to see. Excuse me for interrupting.
Catherine boldly entered, with Eddie and mother-in-law looking displeased, but father-in-law greeted her with a smile. Eddie and mother-in-law probably decided not to send Catherine away. They led my mother, Catherine, and me to the living room where it all happened. Mother-in-law, looking irritated, extended her palm towards me. Give back the diamond ring quickly. It was expensive. I took off the engagement ring and handed it to her. She snatched it and immediately put it in a jewelry case. Now write a statement that you won't talk about this nonsense at work. Can't trust a girl whose mother didn't even go to college. They put a pre-written statement and a pen on the table. My mother and I read it through, checking there was nothing odd, and then I signed it with my full name. You must have been after our money. Too bad for you. Shy, is that true? I thought you were poor because of your simple clothes and bags. Love marriages are doomed to fail. Catherine looked at my mother and me with disdain. Now leave. You're in the way.
Let's serve Catherine some fancy tea and desserts. Just wait a bit.
Okay, thank you so much. Father-in-law, already drinking wine in the afternoon, entertained Catherine in a tipsy state. Eddie watched happily. I couldn't help but smile and warned Catherine, Are you really planning to marry Eddie, Catherine? Oh, Shy, do you still have feelings for Eddie? You're so persistent. I laughed off Catherine's suspicious look. No way, just making sure. Divorce is harder than marriage, I hear.
Stop making trouble. It's just bad timing between you and me, remember?
I wanted to burst out laughing at Eddie's carefree attitude. I glared at Eddie and snapped. Timing? Who do you think you are saying that? Catherine, you better understand what you're getting into.
Enough. Just leave already.
As mother-in-law grabbed my arm, my IC recorder fell to the floor. It switched on from the impact, and Eddie's voice filled the room.
Elsie, I love you. Marry me.
Parents-in-law and Catherine froze. Okay, Eddie, you've had too much to drink. What if you pass out like yesterday?
Then I'll sleep on your lap. And you'll pat my head.
Sure, I'll do all that. Can I order almond too?
Yeah.
I want to drink Dom Perignon too.
Okay, order whatever you like.
Yay! You're such a generous future president, so wealthy. Ordering Dom Perignon black and almond. Catherine's face twisted in frustration. I know about those drinks from my part-time job in college. Both are incredibly expensive. No matter how much money you have, it's never enough if you drink like that.
Leave it alone. We have more than enough money.
So that's why you have a 9 p.m. curfew, Eddie. After dating me, you wanted to go to the bar. You pretended to report to your mom, but you were actually telling the bar girls what time you'd arrive. Sighing, I glanced at mother-in-law, who was shaking and pale. Eddie, you're still with that woman?
Well, Elsie is so cute.
Eddie pouted.
Elsie's got a rare disease. Her parents are missing, and she's working at the bar to put her younger brother through college. Isn't she a great person?
We were taken aback by Eddie's desperate explanation.
I have to support her.
That story is definitely a lie.
Shut up. Even if it's Catherine, I won't let anyone speak ill of her.
The usually calm Eddie raised his voice, shocking parents-in-law and Catherine. After a moment, Catherine covered her face with her hands, bursting into tears. How could you? I trusted you, Eddie.
Catherine.
We were going to get married after breaking up with Shy. You said that from the start. That's why I endured only seeing you on weekends. I never thought I'd be considered less than a bar girl.
Sorry, Catherine.
Eddie frantically tried to explain.
It's different. Elsie is like fandom. Some married people still like idols, right? That's what she is to me. Don't worry about it.
You say you love her? And how much money do you spend on her in a night? You planning to keep spending on her even after marriage? I can't accept this.
Eddie, don't make Catherine cry.
Please stop digging around, whether you hired a detective or not. I smirked at the bewildered parents-in-law. Better to expose the truth now than to have a bigger mess after marriage. It's kinder this way. Mother-in-law was at a loss for words, so I turned to Catherine. Catherine, Eddie is important to you, right? Or is it the money? Don't compare me to you, Catherine snapped back. Just the other day, I got a text from a coworker. After a drinking party, Catherine was bad-mouthing Eddie while drunk. Unfazed by Catherine's pallor, I showed the text to parents-in-law and Eddie. Catherine was trashing Eddie, calling him a frail rich boy, saying she's only flattering him for his money. After all, he taught her at work. Isn't that a bit harsh? Catherine looked relieved. That's not proof, just some coworker talking nonsense. Oh, you're just jealous because Eddie and I are close. Catherine retorted spitefully, then looked up at Eddie with teary eyes. I'm sorry I got jealous earlier. I love you, Eddie, and was scared you'd be taken by the bar girl.
I get it, Catherine. I love you the most, too.
Catherine and Eddie hugged tightly, with mother-in-law visibly relieved. But then father-in-law Alois interrupted.
And you said you loved me.
Mother-in-law and Eddie turned at the low muttering. Father-in-law, completely drunk, slammed his wine glass down on the table. You've had too much, Alois. Why don't you go rest in the back? Catherine tried to usher father-in-law to the back room, but he brushed her off and blurted out.
Catherine loves me. She's marrying me because she wants to be with me. Right, Catherine?
Catherine let out a small scream. Despite his drunken state, father-in-law fumbled with his mobile phone to show us the text screen. It was filled with hearts and kiss emojis. Alois, your gray hair is so distinguished and handsome.
Thanks. You're cute too, Catherine.
I've asked Eddie about living together after we marry, so I can see you every day.
I'll ask Mom about it too. Looking forward to it.
I find wine and whiskey boring with Eddie. I'm so happy our taste and alcohol match, Alois.
Yeah, let's have Mom make snacks and drink while watching sports.
Don't you drink with mother-in-law?
Drinking with an old woman is no fun. Drinking with a cute Catherine makes the booze taste 10 times better.
Oh, you, Alois. Following this exchange, mother-in-law went pale. Then her ears turned bright red. Just as I expected, I thought showing Catherine the coworker's text would make her scramble to cover up. I figured if Catherine flaunted her affection for Eddie, the drunk father-in-law might slip up. Shy, you knew about this, Catherine asked me, surprised by my calm demeanor. A while ago, I saw you, Catherine, leaning on a middle-aged man at a bar. It was strange given how close she was with Eddie at work. But at the family meeting, when I realized the man was Alois, it all made sense.
Father?
What do you mean by this? Despite being glared at fiercely by mother-in-law and Eddie, father-in-law was unapologetic.
It's not an affair. Catherine and I share true love.
Don't joke. What do you take me for? Mother-in-law screamed furiously at my mother and me. Everything was fine until you two messed it all up. How are you going to take responsibility for this? Well, we haven't done anything wrong. My mother smiled gently as if to say, what a pickle. Mother-in-law then turned her fury on Eddie, still in shock. This is all because you fell for the wrong woman. Hey, you know the president, right? Get this woman fired.
Wonder if I can.
Alois, I also find Shy annoying. Can you get her fired?
Okay, I'll ask a president I know.
Catherine looked up at father-in-law with puppy eyes, and he agreed immediately. Mother-in-law gave father-in-law a piercing look. My mother and I exchanged glances and shrugged. Getting fired might be difficult, you know. I pulled out a business card, and parents-in-law Eddie and Catherine leaned in to see. They almost collapsed in shock. Is this?
The vice president of a major American corporation? Shy's mother? No way.
Their jaws dropped further when they saw a photo on my phone. It was no surprise, as the photo showed the president of a well-known company, often seen on TV and in newspapers, smiling and close to me. Shy, you're just an employee here. How are you so close to that company's president? I'm the same as Eddie. I joined our company to learn about society and business. I explained calmly. That company was started by my mother's ancestors. My aunt, my mother's sister, was the president, and when she retired, my mother took over. Eventually, I'm supposed to become the vice president. People often say that family-run businesses are lenient on their kin. That's why we made sure Shy had a solid experience outside our company. What? You're going to become president without even going to college? Ridiculous! Mother-in-law spat out in scorn, to which my mother responded in her calm tone. Don't you know, it's possible to learn business acumen without a college degree. After reading and studying on my own, I attended seminars and training programs and got various certifications. With a slight smile, my mother added, You might want to stop looking down on people just because they didn't go to college. It might end up embarrassing you. Mother-in-law gritted her teeth in frustration, unable to respond. Eddie then voiced his doubt.
But the house we had the family meeting in was old and small.
Our main residence was under renovation. You know, the 1,000-square-foot mansion near the station, right? We invited Eddie to our secondary residence. So Shy didn't approach Eddie for his wealth. I was raised with common sense so that it would be useful in my future work, right, Mom? Yes, I didn't want you to become someone who flaunts their wealth just because they're rich. It seemed parents-in-law and Eddie had no energy left to argue against my mother's subtle jab. Eddie, father-in-law, and mother-in-law, if you make any more strange moves towards my daughter, I won't hesitate to crush your company. Please, be aware. With that final warning, my mother and I left Eddie's house. As soon as they learned about our family's wealth, parents-in-law and Eddie seemed to regret calling off the engagement.
I broke up with Catherine. You're the most important to me. Let's start over. Your mom may not have gone to college, but she's a vice president, right? So my mom says it's okay to make an exception and marry you. I agree, too.
Eddie sent such ridiculous texts, so I immediately blocked him. Conveniently, a position opened up in the sales department, so I requested a transfer there. Eddie's family fell into chaos when father-in-law and Catherine's near affair led mother-in-law to slap divorce papers on father-in-law. Later, Catherine declared in front of mother-in-law that she intends to marry father-in-law, sending mother-in-law into a rage. However, father-in-law insisted they were just drinking buddies, prompting mother-in-law to hire a detective to gather evidence of their affair. Taking my mother's word seriously, mother-in-law embezzled company funds in a bid to claim them before being crushed. However, suspicious behavior led the company executives to investigate, and her embezzlement was quickly discovered. Additionally, Eddie was caught misusing company funds multiple times. After a huge dispute among relatives, parents-in-law's company actually went under. Oh dear, what a mess. But it's none of our business. My mother commented nonchalantly while reading the local newspaper. Later, mother-in-law and Eddie were sued by relatives, but settled by paying compensation. Rumors of embezzlement spread in the company, making Eddie uncomfortable and leading to his resignation. Now, he no longer frequents bars and stays at home. I've become good friends with my colleagues in the sales department, and I'm enjoying my days, focusing on my career rather than romance. It seems I'm better suited to pursuing my career than love. I wanted to ease my mother's mind about settling down, but I've decided not to rush it anymore. If I encounter a chance for love again, I'll carefully assess the person's character, not just their appearance or vibe.
Hello, I've got a bunch of missed calls. Something happened?
My husband's nonchalant return call grates on my nerves.
Huh?
I'm at a funeral right now.
A funeral? Don't tell me it's mother-in-law's.
Quit dawdling and get over here. And tell that jerk sister of yours next to you, too.
Huh? What are you talking about?
Don't play dumb with me, you jerks. In the midst of my mother's funeral, my worthless husband enjoyed an unforgivable trip. I can't wait to see what kind of hell he'll face. I'm Ellie, a 33-year-old housewife. I've been married to my husband Jim for 5 years. I met Jim, a salesman who frequented my office while I was working as an office clerk. We would chat over coffee whenever Jim visited.
Ellie, how about we go out for dinner sometime? Here's my contact.
Oh, yes, thank you. Eventually, Jim took a liking to me and we started dating after exchanging contact information. I was attracted to Jim's confident and free-spirited nature, something I lacked, and eventually we got married. 3 years into our marriage, our daughter Mary was born.
I'll work hard, so I want you, Ellie, to stay home.
Jim wanted me to become a stay-at-home mom when Mary was born, so I quit my job and became a full-time housewife. Being a housewife is tough, and I can't rely on my parents who live far away. Mary is now 2 and in her terrible 2s. She constantly refuses everything I offer, saying this and that is not to her liking. It's a phase in a child's development, but it's draining and wears me out. Meanwhile, Jim is completely disinterested in housework and childcare.
Men should work outside and earn money. Women should support their husbands at home,
he says authoritatively. Apparently, Jim's father was also authoritative, and he seems to be heavily influenced by him. Jim, I understand I'll be the main one doing housework and childcare, but could you help a little? It's really good for children to interact with their father from a young age.
So you're saying you want to take over my job?
No, I can't do that, but...
Then it's not fair. Why should I be the only one to help? I had you quit your job so that you could handle the house and childcare.
Jim always silences me with his so-called logic. But I do feel that his work is demanding. He often comes home late at night and leaves early in the morning on weekends, sometimes not returning home at all. In such a situation, with no chance to see my parents, my stress kept building. And there was another major source of my frustration, my sister Emma, who is 3 years older than me. Ellie, watch the kids for me this weekend. Emma would call my mobile phone just as I was about to doze off after finally putting the kids to bed. Stop joking. You did the same thing last week. I'm not your personal babysitter. Oh, come on. I took care of you when you were little, so return the favor. I don't mind occasionally, but doing this every week is too much for me. I don't even get a break. But you're a stay-at-home mom. You can make your own time, right? If you keep this up, Jim will scold you again. So I'll leave the kids with you this weekend, okay? Wait, sister. Emma would say her piece and hang up without fully listening to my response. I'm not kidding. It's always so forceful. Emma always forces the care of her 3-year-old son Luke onto me. Emma became a single mother a year ago due to a sexless marriage with her husband. She gained custody of Luke and has been living off support from our parents. I wonder what she does. She doesn't seem to be working. I was a bit curious, but with the weekend approaching, I was too busy taking care of Mary and Luke and stopped pondering it deeply. Then, on the Friday morning before taking care of Luke,
I got a terrible migraine, probably due to the continuous childcare. Realizing it was impossible to handle alone in this state, I decided to talk to my husband, Jim. Hey, Jim, my sister asked me to look after her kid this weekend, but I've been doing this for a while now and I'm at my limit. The migraine, it's terrible. Can you help out for these 2 days? Please, I'm begging you. Jim's response shattered my desperate plea.
Huh?
Didn't I tell you? I've got a 2-day golf outing with an important client starting tomorrow, so I can't help. What? I had no idea about this. Aren't you prioritizing work a bit too much? At this rate, I'll really collapse.
You're a housewife, right? Maybe you're just inefficient. I've told you before, home and childcare are your responsibility. Can't you even fulfill that? Useless.
His words infuriated me so much that I was left speechless. Jim finished his coffee and left for work in his usual calm manner, without a word or a see you later. After he left, I boiled water in a kettle and cried. The sound of boiling water didn't matter anymore, as I blankly stared at the steam, tears streaming down my face. Why is Jim so selfish? This house feels like a prison. I don't know how much time passed. The boiling sound stopped due to the stove's safety feature, but the silence was broken by the doorbell. I wiped away my tears and hurried to open the door. Ellie, sorry, this is really sudden, but I need you to take the kids from today. No way, you said tomorrow. Isn't this too selfish? But the situation changed. It's just 1 more day, right? Please handle it alone. I'm begging you. With that, Emma left her son Luke and his essentials at the door and stormed off like a hurricane. What does she think I am? I yelled, then strangely calmed down, feeling something was off. Wait, she said she had to handle it alone today. How does she know I'm alone this weekend? But this question was quickly drowned out by a call on my mobile phone. It was from my father, a rare occurrence. Hello? A call from Dad. What's up?
Ellie, Jane's in critical condition after a car accident.
My father, a quiet and serious man, would never make such a terrible joke. Critical condition?
She's currently in emergency surgery. It's at Massachusetts General Hospital's emergency center. Hurry over here.
Wait, but my sister's...
I'll contact Emma. You just come here, Ellie.
My always calm father had never been this frantic. I quickly gathered my daughter, nephew, and their essentials and jumped into a taxi. Arriving at the hospital, a nurse led me to the intensive care unit, where I found my father, pointing silently to the inside. There lay my mother, bandaged all over, connected to numerous machines and IVs. The little visible skin around her mouth had turned purple. Oh no! Mom! It was hard not to imagine the worst, seeing her like this.
What? Why do you have Luke?
My father noticed my nephew. Emma wasn't answering his calls. I should call Jim. In a daze, I reached out with trembling hands to call Jim. On the way to the hospital in the taxi, I called Jim several times, but he didn't answer. However, when I called him from the hospital, he picked up immediately. Jim, it's my mom. My mom's been in a car accident. I'm at Massachusetts General Hospital's emergency center. Can you come right away?
Actually, I'm already at a golf outing with a key client. Good thing I had my change of clothes and golf bag ready.
What are you laughing at? Just come now. Mom is... Before I could finish explaining how critical Mom's condition was, I heard a woman's voice in the background. Jim, are you still on the phone? I'm going ahead, okay? Who's that?
Yeah, I'll be right there.
I'll hang up now, the client's calling. I haven't really met your mother-in-law much, so it's probably best if you handle it first, right? I'll visit her after this golf trip. Wait, Jim! This isn't a relaxed situation! Jim hurriedly ended the call as the woman beckoned him. After that, no matter how many times I called, there was no sign of him answering. I wasn't so much despairing as I was dumbfounded, staring at the hospital ceiling. The children were being soothed by their grandfather. Father seemed more distracted by the children than concerned about Mom. But I feel like I've heard that voice before. I lay there feeling a sense of discomfort, piecing things together. Even if she's a female CEO and a key client, would she call Jim by his first name? Then it hit me. Someone had recently called Jim by his first name. That'll get you scolded by Jim, you know. Those were the words Emma said just before leaving Luke with me earlier today. Could it be? No way. If Jim and Emma were in cahoots, it would explain why they knew I would be alone this weekend. Right. Emma's on social media. Remembering this, I opened Emma's social media to look for any clues. Got an eagle on a golf trip with my favorite person today. There was a post on Emma's social media bragging about a great score on a golf trip. There was a carefree picture attached. Emma must have been over the moon that day. Golf trip, huh? Jim mentioned a golf trip too. On Emma's social media, there were multiple photos of a lavish hotel dinner. One of them, likely taken by her companion, showed a night view from a hotel bedroom. Leaving your kids to have fun by yourself? Then, one photo caught my eye. In the corner of a night view was a mirror, clearly reflecting a man in a suit. The suit was the same one Jim had worn that day. Hesitantly, I zoomed in on the photo to see the face of the person taking it and was shocked to find my suspicions confirmed. It was indeed Jim. So they were having an affair. Unforgivable. I took a screenshot of the photo as evidence, overwhelmed by a surge of emotion. Both of you, using me like this. I won't let you get away with it. I felt intense loathing for Jim and Emma. Then a loud alarm rang in the corridor, snapping me back to reality. Mom! The sound came from the machine monitoring my mother's heartbeat. Rushing to the ICU, I arrived just as the doctor and nurses were entering. Family members, please wait in the waiting area. A nurse, seeing me approach, gently guided me to a chair in the waiting room. Oh, with Mom in this condition, what are Emma and Jim doing? My anxiety for Mom, mixed with hatred and disappointment towards Emma and Jim, left my mind in complete disarray. The alarm from the medical machine, signaling an irregular heartbeat, stopped once, but sounded again 2 hours later. Despite the doctors' and nurses' efforts, it eventually emitted a steady tone. I'm sorry to say, she has passed away. Hearing these words from the doctor, my father collapsed in his seat. My mother had passed away early the next morning after the accident. Mom! Mom! All I could do was cling to the window of the ICU and call out to my mother, wrapped in bandages. While waiting for the funeral home to pick up my mother, my father, "What are you doing at a time like this? Jane has died. Contact me immediately," sent a message to Emma, then looked up at the ceiling, sobbing weakly. I, too, couldn't stop my tears upon seeing my father. But I pulled myself together, knowing I had to take care of the kids when they woke up. And of course, the funeral preparations couldn't be handled by my father alone, so I too had to get moving. I had to prepare sandwiches and fruits for the guests. I greeted the guests, led them to the altar, and served coffee. While my father was attending to the guests, I dealt with the funeral home.
Then, as the crematorium is available, we can have the funeral and cremation the day after tomorrow. Your mother's body was severely damaged in the accident.
Understood. The funeral director's calm words pierced my heart. I hadn't realized how badly my mother's condition was due to the bandages. In the silent house, the innocent laughter of children echoed. Thankfully, neighbors took care of the children, worried about them.
Ellie, leave Mary to me. Go, send off Jane.
Among the neighbors was Kate, who had retired as a kindergarten teacher last year. I had often played with her when I was young. She was kind and dependable.
Wow, Mary, you're so good at stacking blocks.
It was a real relief to see stubborn 2-year-old Mary being skillfully entertained. Eventually, after finishing the arrangements for the wake and funeral, I found a moment to check my mobile phone. Since then, I had called and messaged both Jim and Emma without any response. They seemed to be deliberately ignoring me. I sighed, resigned, and took a deep breath. First, I need to properly send off Mom. I decided not to think about those two for now. The wake went by without incident, and so did the funeral. Sometime into the funeral, Jim finally called my mobile phone. I had been relatively calm until then, but my tension spiked at once.
Hello? I had several missed calls. Did something happen?
My husband's casual call infuriated me. Not did something happen. While you were leisurely on your trip, we were in turmoil.
What? Why are you yelling? I don't know anything.
How many times do you think I tried to contact you? I'm at a funeral right now.
How dare you say you to me? Wait, a funeral? Don't tell me it's your mother-in-law's.
Yes. Now stop dawdling and get back here. And tell the worthless sister of yours too.
Huh? What are you talking about?
Enough. Playing dumb won't help. Be prepared, you jerks. I cut off the call, furious at my husband who enjoyed an unforgivable trip during my mother's funeral. I was almost looking forward to seeing what kind of hell he would face when he returned. I was ready to confront them thoroughly. A few hours after this call, unbelievably, Jim and Emma returned home together. Moreover, they showed up at the funeral home, a place of mourning, inappropriately dressed in a light gray suit and a flashy red knit dress. Inevitably, those around couldn't help but suspect their relationship. You two seem very close. Are you coming back together? I said sarcastically as Jim retorted.
What are you talking about? I just happened to meet your sister and gave her a ride.
I see. It's quite far from the station here and there's no bus service. You're saying Emma was walking around here? Couldn't she have taken a taxi directly? How unnatural.
What are you talking about? I hurried back from work. What's with that attitude?
Jim's continued domineering attitude towards me was infuriating. Work, 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 what work? Cheating on your wife with her sister? How shameless can you be? I shouted, unable to contain my anger any longer. Then, overhearing this, my sister tried to calm me down. Hey, I wouldn't seduce my sister's husband. Ellie is just tired because Mom passed away. Take a break. Before she could finish, I presented the evidence of their affair. How much do you underestimate me? Did you carefully plan this in the car on the way here? Emma, your social media has a picture of my husband in it. Still going to play dumb? With that, I showed them the image of Jim reflected in the hotel mirror, saved on my mobile phone.
That's...
Jim, you should have cropped it properly. They were really foolish. Their affair was exposed by such unexpected evidence. Moreover, It seems your relationship has been going on for over a year now. There are pictures from that time with Jim's sleazy face in them. I couldn't stop now. I was determined to corner them thoroughly. Emma became sexless with her ex-husband around that time. And Jim, you suddenly got busy with work around the time I got pregnant, right? So that means, since then...
Stop it! Don't say any more!
Yes, don't talk about such things in front of so many people. There was someone else watching them flusteredly, with contempt. My father.
You two. What a disgraceful scene in front of Jane!
Father, usually a quiet man, was truly frightening with anger.
Emma, do you realize how much Jane worried about you? Even when you led a reckless life, Jane wanted us to support you. She wouldn't even buy clothes she wanted, instead giving her money to help you.
Father's intense anger also mercilessly targeted Jim.
And Jim, have you made Ellie happy? Jane always worried about that. Every time she called Ellie, she was concerned because Ellie didn't sound cheerful. And you...
He looked like he was about to physically attack Jim. But in front of Mother's portrait, he seemed to rethink.
Emma, from today, our relationship is over. Jane and I have spoiled you too much. No more financial support. Don't come to our house again, and don't ever contact Emily.
That's impossible. I can't live without it.
Then live like you're dying. That's all I can say.
Father then looked at me.
Ellie, end things with that worthless husband.
I understand. I turned from Father to Jim. Jim, I'm divorcing you. From now on, we'll communicate only through lawyers, and I'll make sure to claim compensation through them. With that, Jim pleaded with me in a weak voice I had never seen before.
Wait, it was just a fling with Emma. I felt lonely when you were pregnant.
That's enough. I'm disgusted. What a cliché excuse. I won't forgive you. Not just for the affair, but for everything you've done to me. You worthless husband. What did he mean by feeling lonely? I had always been alone in parenting. And Emma, I will no longer call you my sister, and I'll make sure to claim compensation from you too. Please, no. I have a young child and now no support. So what? Does that have anything to do with me? I have to raise my daughter alone now. As a housewife, it'll take time to re-enter the workforce. I will definitely claim compensation for your infidelity and for treating me like a babysitter all this time. That's your atonement. That's right. My mother was a strong woman. And what I can't forgive the most is that you both prioritized your desires over the fact that Mom was a victim of a traffic accident. I won't show any mercy here. My precious Mom was disregarded by these two, and now they will have to live a life of atonement. Wait, are you still trying to put me down? Stop it!
Ellie, I love you. Let's make it right.
Their words meant nothing to me, as I declared. What happens next will be your enjoyment. Now, both of you can leave together. After being told so, Emma and Jim left the venue under the cold stares of those around them. Sometime after the funeral, when my parents' home regained its calm, I contacted Emma's ex-husband. The reason was to get the custody of my nephew, Luke, back to Emma's ex-husband. I wasn't interested in what happened to Jim and Emma, but I was concerned about Luke. There's no way Jim and Emma, even if remarried, could make Luke happy. He'll just be neglected. I decided it was best for Emma's ex-husband to take care of him. Upon learning of Emma's infidelity, her ex-husband was furious and decided to claim compensation. Emma, now without support and facing claims from both her ex-husband and me, was about to start a tough life. Jim, my ex-husband, would also be claimed for compensation by Emma's ex-husband. I would demand alimony, child support, and property division from Jim, making his payments substantial. Additionally, I inquired about Jim's unusual overtime and weekend work at his company and reported the divorce due to infidelity. The company may not directly confront Jim about the infidelity or divorce. However, organizations have a way of circulating information without the person realizing. Jim may act confident, but he's a coward inside. So, he will likely feel the strange atmosphere at work and continue working with discomfort. As for me, I've returned to my father's house to live with him. He has been taking great care of my daughter, Mary, and her stubborn toddler behavior has settled down thanks to him. Following the funeral, the former kindergarten teacher, Kate, who took care of Mary, suggested I study to become a kindergarten teacher. Kate also visits occasionally to provide advice and support. "Ellie, you'll be fine. You're kind, so once you get the hang of it, it'll be easy." "Kate, don't flatter me too much." Kate joked and cheered me on while entertaining Mary. I was a housewife, but now I'm pursuing new goals and striving for independence through these connections. I want to make the most of this opportunity that my mother has perhaps arranged for me.